So this morning I'm going to start talking about Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva Way. Specifically, chapter 6 in Sanskrit is called the Bodhicaryavatara. And this is a text that is really popular and used a lot in Tibetan schools of Buddhism. This was my first copy of the book that was from the 80s, and it's well-used copy. This is another copy translated by Skilton, and I don't remember who did this, which is a good translation. Kate Crosby and Andrew Skilton. So yeah. And again, the meaning is Guide to the Bodhisattva Way. So, this is an introductory talk to a series I'm going to give. This talk today is going to be kind of informational, so you have to bear with me. We're going to talk about, eventually, starting the next talk, we're going to talk about chapter 6, which is on the cultivation of patience, which is an antidote to anger. Shantideva covers the paramitas here in this text, and the paramita means perfection in Sanskrit. So it's virtues that are perfected by bodhisattvas. So these are virtues that we want to perfect. And the word itself means something like highest or supreme. And so there are 6 paramitas: generosity, morality, patience, diligence, meditation, and wisdom. Sometimes there's 10, but mostly those 6. And that's what Shantideva covers in this text. So it's about how we develop our practice as bodhisattvas, followers of the Buddha, how we develop this Buddha mind that we already are. So the general outline of the book is that he starts out by talking about gratitude and praise for the awakened mind. The book, by the way, is written in verse, and parts of it are very beautiful. So starts out by praising the awakened mind. So in other words, he's trying to encourage us to want to have this kind of mind, taking refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, atonement for the mistakes that we may have made or make, because I shouldn't say may have, because as human beings, it's pretty much a given that we will or have, so that we have made, and our vow to want to practice the Bodhisattva way. And also then a discussion of gratitude and praise for this awakened mind, taking refuge, atonement and vow, taking up a vow, and then to taking up the vow of the awakened mind, and then the practice with the awakened mind, and then guarding our awareness, perfecting the paramitas. And so he ends the text with a dedication of whatever merit might have been accumulated through his writing of the text. And this is really common in our services. The last thing we do is we dedicate the merit. We say, I dedicate the merit of the recitation of this sutra to eventually to all beings. So we dedicate the merit in the hopes that all beings will be happy, be free from suffering. So we don't keep the merit for ourselves. So that's what he does at the very end of this. And this last chapter of dedicating the merit is 58 verses long. So there's a lot of dedicating going on in this chapter. He says, the first verse in this chapter is, by the good that is mine for considering undertaking the way to awakening, the Bodhicaryavatara, may all people adorn the path to awakening. And so that's the first of these dedications. And again, it's just like our echoes that we that we do. Some people say the echo is the most important part of our service, that we give away any merit that we may have accumulated. All right, so let me talk about Shantideva's biography a little bit. He was born in the 8th century in India. He became a monk, and he studied at Nalanda University, which is a world-famous university, a residential university in India, and probably the first residential university in the world. So this is a really revered institution that he studied at. He had a nickname when he was a student at Nalanda University, and it was Busuku. And the nickname means he who eats, sleeps, and defecates. So that was the rather derogatory nickname that he was given by his fellow students. So they kind of felt like he was a real slacker. But what they didn't know about Shantideva was that at night, the Bodhisattva Manjushri, associated with wisdom, visited him every night, and they studied the dharma together. So that's why he was sleeping during the day, was because he was up all night with Manjushri studying the dharma. Because the other students thought he was such a, goofball, they decided that they would embarrass him. And so they set up this opportunity for him to give a talk in front of all the townspeople and people at the university and everything. And they erected, well, first they asked him, they said, would you like to talk about some dharma teaching that we already have, like give a commentary, or would you like to teach something new? And he said, oh, I'd like to teach something new. And everybody thought that was pretty funny. So everybody was anticipating the, deep and vast embarrassment and humiliation of Shantideva. You got to wonder about their practice.
Yeah.
But anyway, this is the story. So they built this really high dais for Shariputra to speak from, and somehow he managed to get up there quite gracefully. So there was no humiliation in that. So he started to recite. Again, this text is in verse. He starts to recite this text, The Guide to the Bodhisattva Way. So you can see it's quite fairly extensive. And as he recites this text, people are just completely blown away by the beauty of it, the wisdom of it, the scope of the depth of his understanding. And near the end of it, the last chapter, in which he's actually giving teachings before the dedication, is a chapter on wisdom. And so Shantideva, all of a sudden, Manjushri appears about halfway through that chapter, and the two of them disappear, right? And we don't know where they went. So everybody's kind of running around trying to figure out what in the world happened to Shantideva and Manjushri. So they go to Shantideva's cell at the Nalanda, and they discover that he's not there, but they find the complete text of the Bodhicaryavatara. And I think you probably know how to speak Sanskrit, so I apologize for my mispronunciation.
No problem.
Yeah, so
2 years.
so there you have to forgive me. And they also found another book called the Siksha Samudkara, which is called a compendium of discipline. And this is a collection of quotes and commentaries on practice that Shantideva had put together. That book's in print, you can find it. And based on that book, his erudition was quite amazing. He knew all of these sutras, he had read all of these texts and written down things that were of interest to him. Okay, so one teaching we can get from this text is to not be so critical of each other. Because you never know. And my personal experience is that everybody's got wisdom So sometimes it's not as apparent as other times. But everybody has wisdom, so we should be careful about being critical of other people. So Shantideva is associated with what's called the Madhyamaka school of Buddhism. And the Madhyamaka school of the Buddhism, the reason they believe this is based on what he says on the chapter on wisdom, which is quite technical. He goes through, and most commentaries skip this chapter because of how technical it is. And but the person associated with the Madhyamaka school of Buddhism is Nagarjuna, who lived in the 2nd century in the Common Era. And he wrote many things. And particularly he's associated with what the Madhyamaka school means, the school, the middle way. And it's the middle way between believing that things or persons are separate and have no connection with anything else, and also believing that things have no particularity at all. So kind of the middle ground between those two, kind of middle ground between nihilism and between some kind of attachment to thinking that things are real in a way that they are not real. His teachings are associated with the Prajnaparamita Sutra. So the Heart Sutra is a Prajnaparamita Sutra, and there are many of them. So the story about Nagarjuna is that he went down underneath the ocean and he got this sutra, the 100,000 verse version of the sutra, from the Nagas, who are kind of like snake creatures. They're not really snakes, they live under the ocean. And they have these kind of big, they're I don't know, maybe like a cross between a dragon and a snake and an eel or something down, but they talk and they have a whole society down there. And they have a princess who shows up later in some other sutras. So the Nagas are kind of interesting beings. And they have been the protectors of these sutras for Shakyamuni Buddha, because in Mahayana Buddhism, it is believed that Shakyamuni left teachings after his death that were protected, in this case, by the Nagas, that were more advanced than the teachings that he gave to those who followed the early Buddhist path. And so we say the Mahayana is the great turning of the great wheel. And these are these sutras. Do I personally think this is true? Well, no. I mean, not I don't know about the Nagas, but I think that people want to solve problems and they want to figure out things. And as we build on those ways of figuring things out, we create more texts, more sutras, more teachings, more ways to explain things. And so I would say that is what these sutras attempt to do. Anyway, the Prajnaparamita Sutras are associated with Nagarjuna, and he supposedly brought them back from the bottom of the sea, from the Dragon King's palace, or the Naga King's palace. So that's believed in our school to be, or at least in this school, to be the final teaching of Shakyamuni Buddha. Other schools, the Huayan school, think the Avatamsaka Sutra is the final teaching of the Buddha. Our school is closely associated with the Lotus Sutra. That's by Tendai school is thought to be the final teaching of the Buddha. So people have different ideas about this. We chant Nagarjuna's name in our lineage when we chant on Tuesday. And Soto Zen, I would say, is an offshoot of the Madhyamaka school. Okay, so what does this mean? The name of the text, Bodhicaryavatara. Bodhi means to awaken. Bodhisattva as in Bodhisattva, means a being intent on being awakened. So we could say that we're all bodhisattvas. We do this practice. We're trying to wake up, become realized. Charya means the way to go or the way to act, interpreted as the proper way, the path, good conduct, a way of life or training. So this is the way of life or training of one who is trying to awaken. And Atara means to descend into something, to enter into, it's an introduction. So basically this text, again, Guide to the Bodhisattva Way, it's an introduction to the Bodhisattva Way. And I will say that if you can actually do everything that's in this text, you are a very long way towards being enlightened. And I think it's very difficult to do all the things that are in this text, but that it's such a beautiful text, and that we cultivate this way of thinking and understanding the nature of our experience. It's very transformative. So it's very beautiful. And, you know, there are a lot of translations of it. You might consider reading one. There are a lot of many Tibetan translations of it. And I believe the Tibetan is translated from the Sanskrit. I don't know if there's an original Sanskrit version around extant still left. But anyway, yeah, so you can find this and read it if you're interested. I originally went across this because I used to work at San Francisco State Library in San Francisco, and I would just, on my breaks, go up to the Buddhist section and just go through books up in the Buddhist section. And I found this little book filled with verses, you know. I read a couple of them, looked kind of cool. So I checked it out. And it might have been, not this, I did buy this book, but it might have been this copy of the book, because this was an early version of the text. So yeah, I opened it up, and you know, it's like it says, even when the wise are suffering, their minds remain very lucid and undefiled. For when war is being waged against the disturbing conceptions, much harm is caused at the times of battle. I thought, yeah, that, you know, that seems pretty insightful. So I just took it home with me and read it. And I kind of forgot about it after that, until a little later when I was at Tassajara having some issues. And then I remembered this book and went back to it. I think that the chapters on gratitude, refuge, and vow, which I'm not going to be covering, are really inspiring. At one point, he says something like, may I be a bridge for those who are suffering? May I be a doctor? That kind of thing. It's very beautiful, those sections. And sometimes he can be really strict and off-putting. Like people will say, I know people who say, I'm just like not even gonna do this. This is just so in your face. So Shantideva was like, really, okay, this is how you do it. And I'll give you an example, which I'm going to talk about extensively the next talk, because this really puts people off, unfortunately. Let me find it here. Here it is. Every time I've taught this first verse is like, people are like, what? So this is a verse for about cultivating patience as an antidote to anger. There is no evil this worship of the Sugatas, generosity and the good conduct performed throughout thousands of eons, hatred destroys it all. So let me find a better translation of that, because that's not so, it's kind of watered down. Whatever wholesome deeds, such as venerating the Buddhas and generosity that have been amassed over 1,000 eons, will all be destroyed in one moment of anger. Now, you read that and you go, wait a minute, I have been angry so much, I'll never get out of this hole, you know, and so why should I bother? And we'll talk about and then there is no evil like hatred or anger, and no fortitude like patience. Thus I should strive in various ways to meditate on patience. So I want to talk about that first, because it's actually engendered quite a lot of commentary. I think because everybody reads that and goes, oh, even the most like erudite of scholars in Buddhism go like, well, wait a minute, surely there's, you know, we can tone this down a wee bit. Okay, so he can be really strict and off-putting, and I think for Westerners, sometimes his very grandmotherly kindness can be very off-putting. But nevertheless, if we stick with these teachings and we actually do these teachings, they are transformative. We become easier to live with, and we suffer less. And we have more wisdom about our life. And I think one of the things about Shantideva that I find so compelling is it seems to me pretty clear that he knew what he was talking about, which means that he had suffered through the very things that he's trying to help us work through. And he has a very, you know, direct knowledge of the process. So these opening chapters, again, which I'm not going to talk about very much, they kind of soften you up as you read them. They help us recall our gratitude for this life, for the world that supports us, for the people that help us. And we are softened too and recall the beauty of the world that we live in. So, you know, even if you feel like the people around you are a real pain and you don't feel a lot of gratitude about that, the Tibetans particularly like to say, you know, remember the gratitude to your parents for giving birth to you. And I don't know what it's like now, but when I was growing up in my 20s and 30s, I didn't feel a lot of gratitude towards my parents. So that wasn't particularly good as a touch point, you know, for filial piety, if you will. So, you know, if that doesn't work for you, then what does work for you? You know, what does bring about gratitude? And even if our gratitude is that we go outside and listen to the birds, you know, and we look at the sky and we feel this deep gratitude for this world that supports us, or we feel the gratitude for the farmers who provide us with food, or the people who make our clothes, or whatever it might be, you know, that you can see how the work of others supports us and how the lives of other beings supports us in this world. And then to take refuge is to take refuge in something that's bigger than us. In Buddhism, we take refuge in the Buddha and the Dharma and the Sangha. So we cultivate trust. This is the Dharma. We cultivate trust in the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha. And he was a great bodhisattva who was able to bring these teachings to us in a way that we can understand. And so we study what he said, we study what he taught in the Dharma. And in our case, not Shantideva, but often we study Soto Zen, right? We study the teachings of Dogen. And then so that's the Dharma. And then, you know, in the Sangha is we support each other. And Sangha, in our case, traditionally it's meant the monastic community of monks. But now we talk about Sangha as the community that we have. We could call it really any community, but mostly we talk about the community of the members of a particular Zen center. So we are a Sangha. And one of the great values of being in Sangha is that we can support each other. And when we have conflicts with each other, which is not necessarily a bad thing, because when we have problems, then we have to practice. If we never have problems, we don't have to practice. And so we don't have to do the hard work of figuring out how to use the Dharma to alleviate our suffering and the suffering of others. So necessarily having problems with each other is not necessarily a bad thing, although it can be a painful thing. And but we're all on the same team, right? We're all playing by the same rules. So it's like we can understand the nature of our work that we're doing together based on the Dharma, based on the teachings. So that's what the Sangha is. It means that we're all trying to follow the path of the Bodhisattva and the Buddha way. So then we make a vow. We make a vow to follow the path. But the vow we make has to be fairly specific. So we have the Bodhisattva vows. We say, beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable. I vow to become it. I'm missing one. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. Well, that's just so vast and altruistic that how are you going to do that? And we can kind of use them like a koan, but your vow needs to be actually fairly specific. It helps to figure out what it is that you need to work on. So let's say in this case, it's patience. So I say, I vow to become more patient. And I vow to do that. Like, so when I'm driving my car and I'm feeling impatient with traffic, I recall this vow to cultivate patience. Or I have a vow where I feel like maybe I shop too much. So I have this vow to pay attention to that. Like, what is that about? Why am I doing this? That's kind of Western psychologizing. But the vow itself is, all right, I'm being greedy. How does that manifest in my life? And I explore that and I make a vow. I don't want to do this. I'm going to practice generosity as the antidote to that. So it's very specific like that. A vow can be very specific. If it isn't specific to what it is that we need to work on, it's like it's so vast that it doesn't have any meaning for us. And we like to make it vast because then we don't have to do anything. Right, so it's like it's very specific, then all of a sudden we're faced with, if I'm impatient, I'm faced with my impatience and the consequences of that. But if I have a vow like I'm going to save all beings, then it's like, well, what does that mean? It's okay. I can just make up anything I want to. But if my vow is to be patient and I don't let somebody finish a sentence, well, it's really clear that I'm being impatient and I need to work on that. Who is it that wants to finish that sentence? Ooh, so it's like we have to really work with that part of ourselves. So the specificity of the vow is important. So we cultivate gratitude, take refuge, make vows. And these activities, gratitude, refuge, vows, these are like the fuel of our practice. They're the motivation of this practice. And of course, ultimately, the motivation of this practice is that we all are Buddha nature already, that we all resonate with this and understand, no matter what we call our religion or whatever, it's like we understand that we want to find equanimity. This mind, this Buddha mind, this mind, altruistic mind, wants to be able to alleviate the suffering of self and others. So we take an honest look at our life. We don't blame others for the things that we're unskillful at. Because if we do that, then we have an excuse not to change our behavior because it's always somebody else's fault. And so, we're off the hook. And if we do that, then we're never going to have transformation of the self. And so we investigate and we look at our responses, we look at the 10 precepts, and we look at the 6 paramitas and use them. So I'm going to focus on probably, it's gonna probably take me, I don't know, 6 talks or something to get through this. I'm gonna focus on chapter 6, which is, again, the antidote to anger, which is the paramita of patience. But having said that, it's also cultivating patience can be that part, the antidote to a lot of things. So if you say to yourself, well, I never get angry, this has nothing to do with me. So now I can take 6 Saturdays off that Shinshu is giving a talk. I'm sorry, I don't think it works that way, because I will do my best to try to tell you what it also helps with, other than working with anger. So, so that's my aim here. I use this text myself, as I mentioned earlier, when I was at Tassajara. There was a woman there that I just couldn't stand. I mean, I could not stand her. And but I was suffering so much from my own anger about not being able to stand her that I finally decided I had to make transformation. It's kind of like being addicted. So it's like you're on the ground, your tongue's hanging out. You're going, okay, I really will do whatever it takes because I can't stand the suffering anymore. And if you're an anger type, people feel it's okay to dump on you. I guess the logic of it is that because you are being aggressive, because anger is an aggressive emotion, people get frightened and they aggress back on you. And so what happens is that if you're being unskillful as an angry person, you really feel like you're getting pummeled. Kind of like running through a gauntlet of people going, even though they feel like you deserve to be pom, 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 pom. Anyway, so I just thought, oh, I can't stand this anymore. I'm gonna do something about it. I'm gonna make some kind of change. And so I ran across this guide to the Bodhisattva Way and started doing the practices in it. I even wrote it out in a little book. I'll bring that next time. I'm gonna show you my little book that I wrote out the chapter 6 in, carried it around with me. Tried to memorize it, but it was too long. Anyway, these practices really do work, but they require effort, a lot of effort on our part to be able to face our own difficulties and the things that we're doing that are unskillful, and to let go of our defensiveness about that, and to try to make change. And I'll just say again, this chapter is about the antidote to anger. But if you're somebody who you don't perceive yourself as being angry, the techniques in the chapter also apply to other things as well. So please, what I caution you not to do through this series of talks is to say to yourself, oh, I know this person over here is angry, so I'm just gonna it's their problem. I'm just gonna look at them and say, oh yeah, I'm so much better. I don't have this thing. I don't have that thing. So please don't do that. Remember, Santideva really was able to get up on that seat and fly off. And so the story of that is that we shouldn't be critical of each other. We should acknowledge each other's wisdom and compassion that we all have for each other. Sometimes it's just hard to find. And when we're getting our buttons pushed. So that's what I'm going to talk about. Is working on this unskillfulness and pointing out as we go along how I believe these teachings can also be useful in other ways. So, yeah, that's the plan. Thank you very much.